It's 6:36. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Should we have a look at today's newspapers? Have a look at the front pages first, the Sunday Times.
Oh.
In a moment, we'll see it.
Oh, there you go.
No, that's the Express.
Hold on,
Home Secretary, no more Channel tragedies. That's yet another Home Secretary saying they're going to do something about it, I wonder.
Oh, the Times says Sussexes want a royal summit to address their TV grievances.
Yeah.
Another royal summit.
Let's have a look at the Independent today. Patients on mental health wards are dying from neglect. What a terrible headline there.
At the Telegraph, discussing the role of the armed forces in the ongoing industrial action.
And in the Mirror, there you are. You can read about the side hustle of UK inmates who are being paid, we'll talk about that in a moment, they're being paid £3.50 an hour by the taxpayer, you and me, to strip recyclable materials from wasted COVID PPE. Get your head around that.
The Sun are running on a story with Harry and Meghan asking for a formal apology after reports that the former lady-in-waiting to the Queen, Lady Hussey, apologised to Ngozi Fulani.
Yeah, so they want the same sort of apology.
What, from Lady Hussey?
No, not from her, from King
Anyone?
Charles, I presume. Yeah, somebody. They just want an apology.
Let's go through those papers now with a bit more detail with Emma Burnell and Fraser Myers. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Let's kick off with the Mirror, should we? And this PPE story.
Yeah, it's all very bizarre. They're paying prisoners. I think I read that it's not £3.50 an hour. It's £3.50 a day.
Yeah, right.
Which is frankly disgraceful. Nobody, no matter what they've done, if they're giving labour, should be paid £3.50 a day. I mean, that's just. I mean, it's almost insulting. It's like, what's the point of paying them at all? If you're going to make this part of prison activity, make it part of prison activity. If you're going to pretend it's work, pay them a wage.
Well, we don't know what's the standard wage for doing jobs in prison.
Well, I don't know,
Probably
but it shouldn't be £3.50 a day. Either pay people a wage and call it work and treat it as work, and then it's part of
like a proper wage?
the moving
a minimum wage?
I mean, I would say yes. Labour is labour. If what you're doing is moving people into the workforce, then you prepare them for the work. If you're going to pay them £3.50 a day, that's just ridiculous. But more importantly, what they're being paid to do seems to be to take apart over-purchased PPE. Some of which is still in date and perfectly usable, which just seems like an extraordinary waste of everybody's time and whatever money it is or isn't costing. It just, once again, it's the government just not really sort of having any grip on any part of their activities.
Well, hang on. If there's a mountain, as they're saying here in the Mirror, if there's a mountain of unused, discarded PPE stuff, and there are parts of it that are recyclable, then somebody's got to do that job. Why not get prisoners to do it?
If it's still in date, I'm sure there are places it could be used. We're going into a winter crisis. We're seeing COVID rates rise. There's probably PPE needed in places somewhere. And secondly, yes, somebody should be taking apart those bits that can't be used, but we should also be asking how we ended up with this mountain in the first place and who was being paid to purchase it.
Well, yes. I mean, as I say, it seems crazy to destroy it if it's usable and could be sold.
Some of it's usable up to December 2023. It says in this story.
Right. Yeah, some of it could probably be sold to other countries. Yeah. Some of it is not quite up to NHS standards, but has kind of other uses in non-hospital uses and things like that. But I think it's a good reminder of that kind of period of just sheer panic, because some of the figures in terms of, they're talking about billions worth of PPE that is not up to spec, completely wasted, completely unused. It just reminds you of that period of sheer sort of chaos and panic in the 2020s. And I suppose on the one hand, we'd be upset if they'd underbought PPE. That would probably be an even bigger catastrophe. But still, the figures are really quite shocking.
Yeah, I haven't got an issue with paying prisoners £3.50 a day.
Nor me.
It goes into commissary, doesn't it? And then
I mean, what can you buy for? You can't even buy
But what do they need to buy?
Well, this is the question. If what you want to do is set prisoners up, so I would suggest that prisoners with a job should be those that are coming towards the end of their sentence, moving into, and these are I think, open prisons, so there will be prisoners who are moving towards release. What you want to do at that point in a prisoner's life cycle, is to start preparing them for the outside world, which includes things like having a better sense of money, having a better sense of understanding what things cost and how you manage that.
But you get that on scale. You get that, budgeting and all the rest of it happens just on a smaller scale, doesn't it?
Well, £3.50 a day is quite a small scale.
Well, yes, but
it's just not realistic. Either you make the activity part of just being in prison, or you pay them a decent wage. But it's just ridiculous to pretend that this is a wage. It's not a wage.
We want them to get votes next.
Well, yeah, because they're part of our democracy.
Well, they're removed from our democracy, aren't they?
Please.
I mean, they have, most prisoners, again, when we say prisoners, we always think of the worst possible crimes. There are an awful lot of people locked up for things that are really quite minor. For example, most female prisoners are not violent prisoners. There may be a case for those who have completely abandoned our norms around, so murderers, rapists, being further away from our democracy than others. But I think people who've committed fraud or economic crime actually probably have quite an important say in how we run our economy.
Well, they can have it when they come out.
Well, I mean, when they come out, there are many reasons why many of them shouldn't be locked up in the first place, particularly with the female prison estate.
But what's wrong with prisoners being asked if they are paid a wage which is presumably meaningful within prison, even at £3.50 a day? I imagine that's meaningful inside prison. What's wrong with them taking apart wasted PPE and recycling, enabling some of it to be recycled? What's wrong with that?
Well, the story is, I think what the story is trying to get at is that this PPE, it's almost like a bit of a cover-up is what is being suggested, that it's a way of disguising the fact that there are these mountains of PPE, that using the prison system as the sort of labour force rather than contracting out to normal kind of wages. I think that's what the story is trying to get at. It's a bit of a complex story in that sense.
It's a Daily Mirror way of just getting it going to the government, isn't it?
Yeah, basically.
Well, let us know what you think. We've got a whole range of opinions here with GBNews at gbnews.uk. To the Sunday Express, Fraser, the Home Secretary wants no more Channel tragedies.
Yeah, she's written this op-ed in the Sunday Express, and I think it could have been written any day of the year. She's vowed to crack down on the criminal gangs who are facilitating the Channel crossings. Now, obviously, that's necessary, but you'd hope they'd be getting on with that anyway. And how many times must we have heard this claim that with every week, now we're finally getting to grips with this issue. Now we're finally take on the criminals, but we're not seeing much change. I mean, this is got to be the worst year. I think it was something like 9,000 crossed last year, and it's been 40,000 this year. I mean, the jump in numbers is
it gets worse and worse
staggering.
and more tragic.
And yet, the tragic result is that people lose their lives, which is absolutely horrific.
But do you believe that anything will be done, or do you think this is just announcement speaking?
I think this is definitely announcement speak, because it doesn't seem like there's going to be a change in policy. There doesn't seem like there's going to be there's not been more funding announced or anything for tackling this problem. It doesn't seem as if the deal that they hailed with the French recently, there's a sort of investigation in The Sun suggesting that is not making any difference, and that police on the other side of the Channel don't particularly care about dealing with this problem, and you can kind of understand that a little bit. They think it's our problem, not theirs, to control the UK border. So it's the outlook isn't good.
Meanwhile, the weather gets worse, and they still go on.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, in freezing conditions.
The Sunday People, Emma, the RCN giving a deadline to the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, that's a negotiating tactic, isn't it? And the RCNs, by the way, one of the least militant unions that exist, being pushed into strike action after 106 years of not doing so, are basically acting as a negotiating union. You set a deadline and you hope that the other side blinks first. That's exactly what they're paid by their members to do. And they have got very high public support behind them. I think I saw in the same story there was an opinion poll that said 84% supported the nurses getting at least an inflation-busting pay rise. So I think they are in a very strong position.
This hard line that they're taking doesn't seem to be getting them anywhere at the moment, does it? They've gone in asking for 19%, which everybody says maybe that's a negotiating tactic. You start high and hopefully, you'll reach some sort of level. But that doesn't seem to have done them any good at the moment, because the government are just saying, or at least the bosses are just saying no. If you're going to only talk 19%, we're not interested.
But I don't think. I think the government have refused to talk about pay at all. And actually, if you're going to get them down from 19%, you need to do that through having a conversation. B, actually, what you are seeing is an awful lot of Tory backbenchers getting more and more nervous, and now that level of unnamed ministers starting to brief the papers. So the pressure on the government is not just coming from outside, it's coming from inside the House too.
No, that's a fair point. Fraser, drug use in the UK is apparently simply a public health problem.
Yeah, so...
which seems a very odd take.
There's essentially police forces are calling for a kind of consistency across the country, because there's 14 police forces that have a kind of no prosecution policy for people who are caught first time possession of things like cocaine, and they're saying we need a sort of national policy to reflect that. Now it's interesting because that kind of goes directly, they're bumping right up with the government. Only recently Suella Braverman said she wanted quite a severe crackdown on drugs and was talking about raising marijuana to sort of Class A status to treat it like cocaine and heroin.
I'm wandering around. Wherever you wander around, you can smell cannabis at the minute.
Which clearly means that the current process is not working.
Oh no!
But every time we talk about drugs, we seem to accept, don't we, that nothing's working. The current policy doesn't work.
Well, yes, we've waged a war on drugs, and the drugs have won.
Yes,
I like to.
And I mean, it's like all of these things. If you create an illegal market, people will step into it. It'd be much better, actually, if we weren't empowering the people, the really nasty people running the drug gangs, and actually had a better system where we weren't criminalising recreational users who, frankly, we all know some people who've lived perfectly normal lives, but also,
do drugs. Yeah.
And that is actually the norm. And then there are people who, either through illegal drugs or through perfectly legal things like alcohol, are incapable of actually doing it in a recreational way, and they need help and support.
Well...
And if they're going to some nasty fella around the corner cutting those drugs with something terrible because that's where they can get it from, you're not going to stop them.
No.
It's also interesting, talking about the police saying, almost non-enforcement policy. I think that is the policy across the board for all crimes at the moment.
Right. How will we tell the difference?
Exactly. If you're going to be burgled,
is there an acceptable level of crime?
Yeah. Don't expect any help from the police if anything bad happens to you. At the moment, that's how bad things have got. But maybe, I think taking the police off something like drugs, which, there are many people, I don't think it's a clear majority, but a lot of people think that they should be legalised or decriminalised. Maybe that would be a better use of police resources,
Free them up to sort burglary.
Yeah.
And also, equally, bring burglary down, because you've got drugs that aren't being prices raised through criminal gangs, actually monitoring it better, you will have less of that kind of petty crime.
It does make you wonder whether it would be an experiment worth trying.
I mean, everything else has failed, right?
Well, yeah. Really?
Yeah, you do wonder. Right, let's have a quick look at rolling power cuts, Emma, in the Mail. This time we're blaming the Met Office.
I would like to just gently point out to the Mail that the Met Office is not actually responsible for the weather.
No, but even they said they were surprised. They didn't quite think this was going to be quite the cold snap it's turned out to be.
No, and this is prediction is not always an accurate science, but I just think we have a massively creaking infrastructure, which has been true for many years. And whether this cold snap happened now or in February when we usually expect it, I know because my birthday's in February and slip sliding around on the snow is my usual stance. But it's, the problem is not whether we failed to completely get... I mean, I heard about this cold snap coming a good few weeks ago, and we've been talking for months about the fact that we may have power issues and a cold winter would be difficult. I don't think it's the Met Office's problem that we have a really, really poor infrastructure and that we may be getting power cuts.
And we've had the wrong kind of energy strategy broadly, haven't we? Because we don't have enough gas storage. So we're suffering from, the consequences of the war in Ukraine and obviously the correct desire not to use Russian gas. But the UK didn't buy much Russian gas even before the war in Ukraine, but because we never had much storage and we didn't...
Or build enough nuclear.
Or build enough nuclear power.
And we deal with other countries that do deals with Russia.
Yes,
Yeah.
well...
Yeah,
and the other thing is, we've ploughed a lot of money into renewables, and unfortunately, in these kind of cold periods, not only does the sun not shine, but the wind doesn't blow. So there have been days when renewable energy has been producing next to nothing at the exact time when we need energy the most. It's winter when we need to be using more energy to heat our homes, to keep the lights on, to keep ourselves warm.
It's all about
We haven't thought forward about storage.
Exactly, and I'm afraid winter comes around every year. It shouldn't come as a big shock to our infrastructure planners.
No, it shouldn't really. Fraser, Emma, we've got to leave it there. Good to see you. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on.